Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. In this episode, I'm kind of in the process right now of getting my house ready to sell, and I plan on leaving the house fully furnished, and I want it to look super beautiful. But there are a few key pieces that I have like an emotional connection to, and I want to be able to pull those things but replace equally beautiful things. And so one of them is this gramophone that's right behind me. It's a Pathé from France. It plays only a specific kind of record, and it runs on like a little sapphire. And it's special to me because when I worked on it, my favorite little kitty, Mr. Biggles, was kind of my little sidekick through that process, and we were hanging out a lot. So it has sort of an emotional connection to me. So I want to take it with me, but I want to have something else in its place that is equally pretty. I started hunting for a replacement phonograph. The prices on these range dramatically. They're always expensive generally, but like the max you could spend would be like $5,000 on like a Victor Monarch that has like a beautiful wood horn. One day I would love one of those, but not right now. This one I actually found for $450 on eBay, which is kind of a steal if I'm being honest. They tend to be pricey because as the years progress, they become more and more rare. I want to say this one is in fairly good condition. There's a lot of dents on the horn, which there were dents on this one, and I just kind of left it as is. You can easily make a small dent a big dent. So I think once you repaint it, those will be camouflaged for the most part. And like I said, I don't want to do anything that damages it. A few of the things that I do want to address are repainting the horn, mending the cabinet. There's a few nicks and sort of damaged pieces. It does have the original decal, so I don't want to do anything that messes with that. So I'm going to be very careful when working around that. This is the original felt pad, I think, but I do want to replace it. So when I remove that, instead of throwing it away, I'm going to roll it up, put it in a piece of paper, make a little notation of what it is, include a few photographs of what this looks like at the moment, with a date, and store that inside the cabinet. So if a collector comes upon this in the future and wants to undo the work that I've done, they're going to have everything that is original to the piece to work with. So I always try to think about that when I'm working on something that's really special and rare. I want it to be beautiful for the intents I have for it, but also at the same time, I want people in the future to be able to, do whatever they want with it. I have several ideas for what I want to do with this exactly, but I think I want to actually delve into it, start working on it, and find out what those are before I start stating what those plans may be. So I think we are ready to begin. We're going to be stripping this outside, painting it outside, and then doing a lot of the mending indoors. And just seems like kind of like a fun January project. So let's begin. Okay, so now I'm outside. I'm looking at the horn in the daylight, and I'm realizing a couple things. If you get in close here, you can see, so this is an original paint job. I'm fairly confident that this was never repainted from the original paint that was done to it. And you can see the imperfections. I think this is one of the lower end models when it was a brand new item. These are the sorts of things that I'm talking about where the perfection and precision of it wasn't quite what you would get if you were buying one that was a little bit pricier. But that doesn't mean we can't make it look fancier and kind of enhance what it looked like even when it was brand new. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a paint stripper. I'm doing this outside. I've got layers of drop cloth down because I don't want to get this all over the place. I'm going to have a respirator on, safety glasses, gloves. I'm going in with the assumption that this is lead-based paint, so I'm going to treat this kind of how you would with anything that's lead-based, which is you don't want anything like that touching you. We're liquefying it. I guess we're atomizing it somewhat as far as like the fumes are going to be coming off of it. I don't want to be inhaling any of that. So once this part is done, it's going to be pretty simple, and this is going to be kind of a relatively quick and fun project. All right, so my initial plan was to paint this outside, and then I realized how cold it was out there. So I've decided to kind of, what are you doing? Little doggy's right here. What are you doing? Okay, so anyway, I've decided to make a little setup in here. I've got a drop cloth in here. The overspray from an airbrush isn't too dramatic, so I think this will contain it. So let's talk about this horn and what I am planning for it. So it's called a Morning Glory horn. They styled it and designed it after the flower on a Morning Glory vine. And some of the earlier horns actually mimicked the coloring. They were usually in shades of blues, greens, occasionally a pink. But I think I kind of want to do this different than any that ever existed, or at least as far as I've ever seen. I have a lot of these like plum type shades happening in this room as sort of an accent. And I think sort of mimicking that coloring on here will really kind of work with the room and sort of look very beautiful. So I've got a bunch of different bottles here. I'm going to mix all of the different colors I'm going to be doing. I'll do sections, airbrushing them, and then just sort of switch to different shades. I think having the shades transition like that will give a lot of beauty and dimension to this piece. And I don't know, that's my next step, and I'm pretty excited about it. Creating a seamless gradient is a bit of a process. So I always use a lot of really thin coats if there's anything that I'm not super pleased with. Because we have all of these colors pre-mixed, it's pretty easy to just go back over and smooth out anything that doesn't work out quite like you want it to. My Achilles heel as an artist is I don't have a terribly steady hand, so I'm creating a stencil that I can lay down on each petal and mark with a pencil, and then I can go back in with some gold paint and do like a really smooth pinstriping. If I attempted to do this freehand, it would look like something a kindergartner had done. Okay, so this is the part that stressed me out the most of this entire project, just because I had spent so much time getting that gradient just right. I really didn't want to mess anything up with the gold striping. So I sort of painted a very thin starter line and built that out very slowly and very carefully. Like I said, I don't have a terribly steady hand, so I really had to take my time with this part. I was actually pretty surprised at what good condition the cabinet was in inside. The support chain that held the door had come undone, so I mended that. But the motor was incredibly clean and well greased, which sort of tells me that the previous collector had definitely been maintaining it and taking very good care of it. Watching how this mechanism operates is so hypnotic for me. I think it's so fascinating that, without electricity, it's able to perform this function just based on a spring and weights. I think that's kind of fascinating, and when it plays something, it sort of defies logic that this is something mechanical and not electronic. I've decided to paint the arm of this gramophone, so I had to remove it from the cabinet and then very carefully remove the reproducer from the end. You do have to be very careful with these just because they are very fragile. The top of the cabinet has a thin layer of tiger maple as a veneer, and over time I'm sure moisture has gotten in there and just very, very carefully lifted up some places, and in this area, like a little chunk had chipped away. So I'm going to fill it. I probably didn't have to do this, but I get kind of nitpicky about things like this. So I'm filling it with a little bit of wood filler, and then I'm going to go back in and very, very delicately hand paint it to match with the rest of the cabinet. It's nearly impossible to make something like this totally, disappear. So I'm going to get very, very close. The nice thing about this is it's a little bit of a preventative measure, so that the surrounding areas around that chip it'll be less likely that it will chip away further and create sort of a bigger mar on the cabinet. I went over the entire cabinet with a very thin coat of linseed oil, taking extra special care to avoid that decal. My initial plan was to dye the felt to get the shade that I wanted, but after experimenting a little bit, I realized it was just not going to yield a result that I want. So I've decided to use an airbrush. I've reduced all of my paint colors with a thinner, and then this way the paint soaks into the felt as opposed to just resting on top of it. I tried to be pretty careful when removing the felt in case someone in the future wants to reuse it. It was really fun. As I removed it, you could see underneath just how vivid and green that color was when it was brand new in 1906. So technically, I could be done now, but part of my creative process is if I think of something extra to do and then I don't do it, I never feel like the project is finished. So I had this kind of harebrained idea to create a clawfoot pedestal for the cabinet to rest on. And I don't know, I just feel like anything I can think of to make something more special, I just have to sort of run with. Making sure you have a stain that's going to match to the original cabinet is kind of a process. I have a ton of shades of stain at my house, and I just sort of, I test run them on little scraps of wood, hold them against the cabinet until I know I've got just the right coloring. right, I am totally finished. I can't believe how great this came out. So I mentioned that I bought this to leave with the house, and I'm still going to, but I bought it to replace this thinking like, oh, I can make it look pretty nice, but not as nice as that. And instead I made it like my dream gramophone. It's so beautiful. I can't believe it. So, but you know, I can find another one and do something interesting to that one. I thought I'd give you a tiny little bit of history on this because after I filmed the intro for this episode, I went back and looked, and I was wrong. I said I spent $450 on this. It was actually $525. And I even messaged the guy who I bought it from. His name's Gordon, and he's a collector, and he had actually purchased this from a friend that he had sort of found the information in like a bulletin of an antique shop, and he bought it in 1981 for $400. So I don't know, I just think any kind of information like that is super interesting. I love knowing the histories of where things come from. So I figured the best way to end the episode would be to actually play a little bit of a record. And I have my #1 favorite record sitting right here. So before I get to that, the first thing you need to know about gramophones like this is with every play, you have to replace the needle. And I guess that's because these little steel needles like warp or something after a single use. And then if you continue trying to use them, you can potentially scratch and damage like a century-old record, and you never want to do that. So I always buy like needle replacements on eBay. One day eBay is going to run out of those and I'm going to be sad. So maybe I should stock up. Okay, so you just pop that in, set that aside. So I have a Columbia record in a Columbia sleeve, and I'm going to play it on a Columbia graphophone, which might seem silly, but is oddly exciting for me for some reason. So I'm only going to play a little bit of the song, but it's one of my favorites.
Don't you be afraid of him if he should visit you. He's a great big tower, so I'll tell you what to do. Hush, 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 here comes the boogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can.
So that is Hush, 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 Here Comes the Boogeyman by Henry Hall. This is my very favorite record, by the way, because it has Teddy Bear's Picnic on the opposite side of the record. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I personally absolutely love restoring antiques, finding antiques, making them new again and spooky, and sort of preserving them all at the same time. So if you guys like this kind of episode, let me know, and I'm always happy to do these sorts of projects just because they're massively fun and rewarding for me. Anyhow, well, I think we are all set. I can't wait for you to see what's coming up in February. I have a ton of fun things, and I will see you very soon. Have a great night.